Nothing generates engagement on social media quite like rage bait. Content designed to make people angry and outraged so that they click, comment and share. Ed Coper, a communications expert and author of Angertainers, How Social Media Ruined Everything, says these platforms are making billions from normalising anger and division, creating an unprecedented threat to democracy, civil rights and social cohesion. And as Coper writes in an exclusive essay for the magazine this week, this is happening not just in Trump's America, but through manufactured anger much closer to home. I'm Conrad Marshall, and from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, welcome to Good Weekend Talks, featuring weekly in-depth conversations with fascinating people. Ed Coper has advised everyone from Greta Thunberg to Shakira to the historic teal movement in Australian politics. And he joins us today for a chat about everything from the manosphere to the way the digital world holds up a toxic mirror to humanity's worst attributes, from narcissism to racism. Today's conversation is hosted by Good Weekend senior writer Greg Callaghan.
Thanks, Conrad, and welcome, Ed.
Thanks, Greg.
Now, the 2025 Oxford Word of the Year was rage bait. It refers to online content, video, articles, posts designed to manipulate people, to make them angry and outraged in order to generate high volumes of content. But it's on social media, as your book outlines, that it's at its loudest, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And social media is really special amongst all forms of media because it maps to something that we've been carrying around in our head for a very long time. In fact, for all of human history, we actually have this inbuilt algorithm that takes in all the information that we see around us and decides what should we pay attention to. So obviously in prehistoric times when our brains were built, this was scanning the environment for threats. And the reason it does that is because it's much more important for our survival as a species that we pay attention to something that's threatening than something that is pretty or otherwise entertaining. And so that's what we select for. Now, social media has taken that ancient process and put it into a platform that does that job for us. So it scans all of the volume of information that's out there and selects for things that that it thinks we'll pay most attention to. Now, what do we pay most attention to? It's the things that make us angry, the things that make us outraged because they feel like threats. And so it's an incredibly brutally effective machine to service these sorts of outrage bait and rage bait because that's what our brains love. And the platforms know that our brains are going to engage with that more so than any other type of content.
Social media was pretty benign until the algorithm came in around 2015, 2014, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, look, if you think back to the dark ages of when many of your listeners might have had their first social media account, something like Facebook, it was literally a chronological timeline of absolutely everything that your great aunt posted for breakfast or, so-and-so just became friends with, another person. Everything was posted in chronological order. And that wasn't a very good experience for people. And so the platforms decided that they should determine what people see. And that's where they built the algorithms in there to choose for people what they thought they would engage with. And that changed things dramatically. So in the early days of the internet, it was really a hopeful place. It was very optimistic. It was all about democratizing information, giving equal access to everyone who could connect to the internet. And a lot of the early years were built around that feeling of hope. If people remember Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign in the US, that was the slogan. And all of the commentary around it was how he harnessed these new technologies like the internet and social media for a very hopeful campaign. Spend 5 minutes online now, you would agree that it's a very hateful place. It is, now that the algorithms are in charge, much more built for people who want to spread negative emotions than positive emotions like hope. And so it's become a much darker place as a result.
And meanwhile, the social media companies led by the tech titans are making countless billions from creating division and from creating anger and sowing, conflict in the community.
Yeah, billions and sometimes trillions. These companies were the first to become, 3 extra zeros on the end of their market capitalization, $1 trillion companies. And the reason for that is we live in what people call an attention economy. So you can monetize things that get people's attention. And we are overloaded with more information now than we ever have been in human history. And so to win the attention economy, you have to have things that are more attention-grabbing, more extreme, more able to incite emotion. And the platform's business model is to find things that grab people's attention and then monetize that. They get people's eyeballs and then they sell those eyeballs to advertisers. So they didn't set out to make these great anger machines and outrage machines. That's just the logical conclusion of something that tries to win the attention economy, because that's what gets our attention.
You write in your book about the formula for creating Angertainment. Can you break it down for us?
Yeah, and this is an ancient formula that's always been true. It's just very effective now that people can manipulate the platforms that serve us information. And it's always been true that when something grabs your attention and makes you feel an emotion, it can make you do anything. So the formula is that emotion plus attention, that can create an intention. And this is what advertisers have known since time immemorial. This is what political operatives have known since time immemorial. If they can say something attention-grabbing or show you a video that's very entertaining and makes you feel an emotional reaction, you're really at their mercy to be directed in any way they so choose. Now, often that's just to buy their product or to vote for a certain candidate. But this is an entire economy that has been built on this formula on social media, where people are going out of their way now to create things that are both attention-grabbing and emotion-inducing in order to build their own cultural, political, and social capital.
Often based on misinformation and lies as well, unfortunately. I was speaking to a veteran editor the other day, and she observed she'd never seen so much anger in the community. This at a time when most of us are better off than we were, that people have better lives than they did and richer lives than they did 30 years ago. What is creating all this anger, you wonder, and social media seems to be normalizing it. You got a little bit of an insight into this kind of hostile division, this kind of easily bred anger at a baseball match, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. And now, look, Greg, are you a cricket fan?
No.
Well, you can understand that cricket is quite a docile sport. If you go to a test match, you generally sit there for 5 days, and really it's about sitting in the sun, maybe having a beer in hand and casually watching, the game meander by. Baseball's kind of similar usually. Baseball is all about going out there. It's a summer sport. It casually meanders by, and this was kind of my understanding of baseball. But in 2015, in the Major League Baseball, it got to the playoffs, and there's the team from LA, the Los Angeles Dodgers, was playing the New York Mets, and one of the players from the Dodgers, called Chase Utley, he did a very egregious slide into one of the Mets players and actually broke his leg. It also changed the result of the game, and the Dodgers won that game. That was in LA, and the Mets fans were incensed. The whole city was, simmering with tension. And the next game was in New York. Now, my wife is a Dodgers fan. She's from LA, and so she was very keen to get out there and see, this playoff baseball. And I went out there expecting it to be fairly docile, like all of the baseball that I'd experienced in the past. But what I experienced when I got out there was more intense than any other sporting event I'd ever been to. It was the stadium was shaking with rage when this player, Chase Utley, took the field. In fact, they didn't even let him play because it just wasn't safe. And as the crowd were baying for his blood, they didn't get that satisfaction. And there, all of a sudden, is my wife in her Dodgers hat and shirt, and they turn their attention to her. And I don't know what age rating this podcast has, but there are a lot of expletives thrown our way. People started throwing popcorn and really turning their anger on my wife to the point where we actually had to cover her up in Mets gear, smuggle her out of the stadium and get on the train to leave. And the reason I tell this story is the people who are shouting abuse at my wife might have been otherwise very, friendly, nice people. They might have been her colleagues, her co-workers, someone that she meets in a cafe, and they're normally very pleasant. But because we were wrapped in our identities around that sporting event, her in her Dodgers gear and the other fans in the Mets gear, it changed the entire nature of that relationship, where it got very hostile very quickly. Now, the relevance of this is when we're in real life, we generally don't wear our identities so obviously as we do in a sporting match. But when we're on social media, we're generally putting on the uniforms of our team. We're reducing the other people to that very simple one-dimensional caricature of the other team. If I'm a Trump supporter and someone posts something anti-Trump, all of a sudden we're dressed for battle like the fans were in that baseball game. And the same thing happens. Otherwise docile and pleasant and nice people will turn very hostile. So the reason this is such a problem is that social media puts us constantly in that environment like we were in at Met Stadium. And the results are just as hostile, just as violent, just as predictable. And we live in that state every day because we recreate the same kind of oppositional in-group and out-group, reduced to our one-dimensional team uniform rather than three-dimensional humans like we are in, our day-to-day lives.
A never-ending rowdy town hall, indeed. In what I'd call now the disunited states, MAGA followers, castigate Democrat supporters as Democrats and liberals as libtards. I mean, there's always been a bit of, healthy tension between Democrats and Republican supporters in America, but now it's vitriolic. And similarly, Trump supporters are called fascists and enemies of democracy and decency by people who are opposed to him. Public discourse has deteriorated so much that, Trump has been able to get away with making fun of a disabled person. He called a woman on Air Force One, a journalist, piggy. Disgracefully, not one male journalist jumped to her defence. Can we blame social media on this sort of sharp deterioration in public discourse and, for that matter, etiquette and manners?
Well, we can. In a word, we can, because social media rewards those who are most attention-grabbing. So what is Trump expert at? Very good at getting attention. And that's an exact example that you recall there, the anecdote on the plane. That female journalist that he said quiet piggy to had asked him about the Epstein files. Now, all of the column inches and airtime that night was dedicated to the insult that Trump had thrown at the Bloomberg journalist, not about the substance of her question, which was a very legitimate one to raise. And so this is what the social media ecosystem will reward. It's going to focus on the trivia, not the substance. And the more angry or emotive or, outrageous you are, the more likely you are to get attention. So MAGA is ascendant in the US. Similar figures are ascendant globally. We have, obviously, Pauline Hanson is someone in Australia who's very good at doing these kind of stunts that get attention. You have Nigel Farage in the UK who, we will see, by the time listeners listen to this, there are local elections there that he is polling at the top, his anti-immigration party. Why are they in the ascendant? Because they understand how social media works. They create their content for platforms that reward stunts and reward insults and reward anger. And the types of things that you would normally find in a political discussion, like nuanced policy debate, data, research, these things tank. on social media. And the more we get our information from social media, the more we're going to hear from people like Trump and less from the real experts on an issue.
And we've also seen how sort of anger on social media is being generated by trivial concerns, such as, and you give the example of the Cracker Barrel logo in your book. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for people to understand that what seems like outrage on social media is very often manufactured. It's coordinated, and people will agree, let's make this thing an outrage. And so the Cracker Barrel story is a perfect example of that. Cracker Barrel is a highway restaurant in America. A lot of truckers might stop there on their way from A to B. And very popular with the types of people who generally are supporting MAGA and Trump in the US. Now, their sales were declining. They did what a lot of brands do. They refreshed their look and feel and their logo. They updated the font of Cracker Barrel. There was a character called Uncle Herschel sitting on a barrel, very old-timey, kind of folksy aesthetic. They dropped that and modernized the brand. Now, the internet's reaction was extreme. It dominated social media. It was outrage, the levelling accusations of the woke takeover of a cherished American icon. These are crimes against humanity. Let's fire the CEO. It was ridiculous, but it was effective. It created so much noise that Cracker Barrel actually lost a significant value from its share price because of the backlash, and they reversed course. They dropped the logo change. They made a phone call to Trump, a grovelling phone call to say, thank you very much for your feedback. You're right. We're not going to change the logo. Now, of course, what we can unpick in all of that is these MAGA networks who are all connected by WhatsApp groups where they decide what is the outrage of the day going to be today? What can we make into a culture war issue? How is a logo change actually related to a culture war issue? But if they can do that, they know they're going to win social media. They coordinate their talking points and then they pour gasoline on the outrage and it spreads like wildfire. And it's very, very powerful. Companies will hide their head in shame now at the fear that they might get the same treatment as Cracker Barrel. That's real power. And it's all produced by social media outrage.
And yet it's being perpetuated by an angry, calculating few. I'm sure if you did a survey in America about Cracker Barrel logo, the vast majority of people wouldn't give a flying FU about it, really. It's just one of these sort of confected outrages you mentioned.
Of course not. And you know what else they don't give an FU about is any of the other issues that dominate social media. What bathroom people can use, trans athletes in college sports, immigration. These are the things that dominate social media. But then you look at the polling, and it's a very small minority of people who hold those views. And that's the problem. It distorts all reality.
Yes, it does distort reality. And yet the Trump administration, of course, has been able to bully universities and large companies about their equal employment policies, their diversity and equity programs, and even most recently the voting rights of minorities. And they seem to be getting no pushback. And this leads me to a line of a show that we were both talking about prior to the interview today, and that is the very excellent Australian crime drama Mr. In Between. There's an iconic line by the main character, Ray Shoesmith, and it is, "The world is full of assholes, right? You do realise that. And you know why? Because people let them get away with it." My question to you, Ed, is why are so many of us, and I include the legacy media in this, letting them get away with it?
Well, it's a new playbook, and it's just been very confronting for people to catch up to and to adjust to. And we kind of have our old lens on when we view it, but what we need to do is update the way that we see our new information ecosystem. And that's really why I wrote the book. I feel like we need this understanding to navigate our way through social media-based information ecosystem. So whereas the media, traditionally legacy media, would be focused on giving equal hearing to both sides and reporting on the shared facts and the events of the day, this turned out to be easily manipulated by people who knew how social media worked because they have noise and volume. And the way that legacy media traditionally viewed an issue was, look, all of these people over here are very angry about an issue. Let's talk about that. Let's report on that. Now, you can manufacture that. You can have robots do it for you on social media. You don't even need real people. Or you can have a small number of real people appearing much larger than they are. And so it's been a very slow and painful process for people to realise that you can manufacture what looks like public opinion. And the other thing that Trump understands that a lot of others don't is that any attention counts, negative or positive. So he might do something like call a journalist a piggy, and we report on that and say that was very inappropriate. He doesn't care as long as you're talking about it. Negative attention counts just as much as positive attention in the attention economy. And people in politics have been slow to realise that. People in the media have been slow to realise that. And we need to update our understanding of how information travels now, how opinions are formed now. So you think, and to quote Ray Shoesmith back at you, he's as a hitman, he would say, my job's not to collect the money. I'm just here to make you regret not giving it when you had the chance to. and it's a little bit similar, right? So these people who do rage bait, people mistake them for being genuinely interested in the issues they're talking about. They're not. One of the reformed rage baiters is Ashley St. Clair. She had one of Elon Musk's babies. Quite a few women can lay claim to that. But she now regrets all of the rage bait she did, and she called it performative viciousness. Now, these people aren't angry. They know that if they can appear angry and appear vicious and induce that emotion in others, they get rewarded. There are rewards for people. They can monetize it. They get influence. They get political power. And so we can't mistake the substance of what they're doing for the architecture around it that is trying to elicit those reactions. So I think that's something we just need to update our understandings around.
The traditional media have been up against what the former White House strategist Steve Bannon described as flooding the zone with shit, basically a game plan for overwhelming the press and public with so much information, so much outrageous content that the truth gets lost, or the pushback is so much harder because you're moving from one confected crisis to the next. It's been very, very successful.
It's disorienting. Right? Earlier, you listed some of Trump's, indiscretions. And I was thinking as you read them, I thought, oh, yeah, I forgot about that one. Because we're so quickly on to the next one. And every day there is a torrent of, scandal and outrage and hysteria. And we can't keep up. The way that our legacy media is established is to, report on an issue over days. Well, social media flits from one issue to the next in minutes, in seconds. If I don't open my phone this morning, by tonight, it'll be some other outrage that's trending. And we can't keep up. Now, this is by design. This is absolutely by design. And they've said as much. Steve Bannon's one who coined that phrase, flood the zone with shit, and others like Stephen Miller, who's the architect of a lot of Trump's platform, have admitted as much. They say, we're going to keep you, our opposition, and you, the media, so busy trying to catch their breath on the outrageous things that we're saying that we can get away with anything over here on the other side while you're not looking. We can do whatever we want because there's no way you can keep up with all of the torrent of outrage that's coming your way.
And we saw in Australia how social media can stoke social division as well when the voice referendum was happening. The proposed voice to Parliament was simply a consultative body that would advise Parliament on laws that directly affected Indigenous Australians. That's all it was. based on surveys, indicated that 75% of Australians supported the voice, and most of us thought it would succeed. But it failed, with only 39% of Australians voting for it. What happened between those early surveys and the actual vote?
Well, what happened is that Australians got a brutal lesson in the power of Angertainment, in the realisation of a lot of these themes that we've been talking about. The idea of flooding the zone was really something that many Australians experienced for the first time right before their very eyes. You know, as you suggested, it was quite a modest proposal, a consultative body, but this became a canvas that all sorts of social media outrage could be painted onto. And so we saw all of the features of Angertainment really come to bear on this issue, from the networks of people spreading misinformation deliberately to confuse people, from AI-generated content to right through to bots that were built to spread it. You know, I found one post that had only, a handful of likes, but 52,000 shares on Facebook. Now, you don't have 52,000 shares on a post that only has a handful of likes. That's just not possible. Those were bots, but all of a sudden it seems like our social media feeds were saturated with everything from they're going to take Australia Day, they're going to take your land, they're going to burn the flag, they're going to change the national anthem, all of these things that were very emotive but had nothing to do with the issue at hand. Social media was the perfect crucible to sink an idea like The Voice, because while you needed a lot of considered and nuanced information in order to support it, all you needed was a bit of noise to drown that out, to convince people that this is all a bit confusing, this is all too hard, I don't like this, I don't like that. It was not a level playing field. You saw for the first time here what a lot of people around the world in other countries had already experienced, and that is manufactured social media hysteria to prevent policy reform.
Yes, it's extraordinary. And you're absolutely right about the bots. They're actually like a disease now. They're right across Instagram and Twitter. If you're aware of them, you actually tune out of the subject. I don't have much regard for Twitter anymore, and increasingly with Instagram, I'm not taking it. Not that I ever took it seriously, but I'm just dismissing a lot of the material there. One of the anger echo chambers is, of course, the manosphere, which is actually more a swamp where a group of angry men blaming women meet the kind of consumerist, materialistic, dare I say, narcissistic culture that we have now. What surprises me, though, is that what I call the kind of fake tough guys, Donald Trump, an obese guy in orange makeup who many people perceive as a tough guy, when he suggests that he could have taken on the Parkland mass killer. I mean, you should be laughing at that, not listening to it. The nonsense that he speaks has been so normalised that people barely bat an eyelid anymore. Then we have Pete Hegseth talking like a teenage gamer in his press briefings on the Iran war. We are punching them while they're down, which is exactly how it should be.
Well, look, some things haven't changed, right? So I was once a teenage boy myself. I'm sure you too, you were too, Greg. And we were full of fake bravado, fake male bravado, pretending to be stronger than we were, pretending to be cooler than we were. These things are very normal. This is part of, how a young man forms their identity and finds their place in the world. The thing that's different is what that looked like for me was, me and my friends might put on a Canberra Raiders jersey and pretend to be Ricky Stewart or Laurie Daly, right? Or maybe get one of those fake, cigarette candies and pretend to smoke, which we thought was very cool back in the 1980s. That hasn't changed. But what has changed is now everything is on camera. Everything is curated. And that same teenage male impulse to have that fake coolness and fake bravado, they can do that on platforms that allow them to gain a lot of attention and actually monetize that. Their equivalent is saying, I've got these looks maxing tips. Have you heard of that? Or I'm a high value man. I can optimize my life. And it comes from a place of insecurity, like all teenage male bravado does. But now we inhabit a world where that is rewarded, and they can broadcast that, and they can find a following, and they can connect with others. And the net result of that has been to, rather than learn through those, development phases, to be rewarded for the worst impulses, to be rewarded when they have an abhorrent view about women, to be rewarded when they say that success is this cold, lonely detachment, and this, a muscly physique, and a sharp jawline. And they're able to compete at those things. And the people that they look up to are the ones who most embody that. And this has had really, really bad consequences. We look at some of the polling that shows that, countries like Germany or the UK, the number of young men who think that a woman's place is in the home has grown by 400% in the last few years. To shocking levels of young men. So if people think that these are fringe opinions now, the manosphere is mainstream for young men globally. And we need to find ways to actually reintegrate that normal social environment that comes from face-to-face connection that they don't get when they're cut off from that, when they're just surrounded by the toxic bits, just surrounded by the masculinity, that defines itself by wealth, wisdom, and being jacked. There's no information to tell them that that's not how the world works, and that we shouldn't reward those things, and it's incredibly harmful for society.
Yes, well, from Andrew Tate to Clavicular, they're pretty atrocious role models. Needless to say, China's seems to be doing something about it. It now requires influencers on serious subjects, health, medicine, law, education, to hold verified degrees, professional licenses, certifications. Here's the thing: they're actually qualified to give advice. We in the West, as our position in the world declines, seem to be on this self-destructive mission. Why don't we do something like this?
Yeah, look, and it's fascinating, right? I don't think we need to necessarily adopt what China does wholesale. There's obviously caveats we need to give around that. But what's really interesting is them putting some architecture around the idea that to be an expert, you should be an expert. And of course, as anyone who spends 5 minutes on social media now would see, anyone can be an expert. Now, I don't know if you need necessarily the qualifications that the CCP thinks. I don't have a degree in computer science or communications. I've got a history degree and a law degree. Does that qualify me to talk about social media? Well, I live there every day. I think the important thing is really on the audience side rather than the influencer side. So there are always going to be people out there trying to sell their latest health tip or wellness routine. But if we can provide people who consume social media with an education about the dangers of that, of how to ingest information safely and responsibly, for them to look, is this person an expert? They should be doing that, as any informed individual should. When you read legacy media as much as social media, is this biased? Is this trying to sell me something? That kind of critical consumption of social media is really where we should be focused, because, of course, any attempts from governments to regulate this often fall down because the line between censorship and regulation is often a very blurry one.
Indeed, gosh, it's a huge task. It's a huge challenge. I'm not optimistic, to be honest, but we'll see how we go. It's taken decades for civil rights, women's rights, rights for Indigenous people, LGBT rights. These have taken, as I say, decades to mature and to be accepted across the wider society. We've created a society of reasonable tolerance and social equity. All of this is now at risk by this kind of miasma of anger, conflict, misinformation, and kind of obvious lies. It's deeply dispiriting.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we don't have decades. That's the difference. History has been running at the same speed for thousands of years, and the institutions we set up around that in politics and media are built around something that moves at a snail's pace. We will see a new technology and regulate it, and where there are harms and impacts that we'll see, there'll be a groundswell of political public support around a political solution. We don't have the luxury. This is one of the reasons why social media has become so harmful and so pervasive, is that it developed before it could be regulated. And the platforms, by design, as these viral advertising machines, became something accidental, which was our town square, our public square. Now we regulate, you work in the media, it's a heavily regulated environment because it is very important to our town square. We never caught up with social media. We never asked the same of them that we do of legacy media because it happened so quickly. Now, what's going to happen with AI? Even more quickly. The scale and pace of change is happening so quickly that it's going to be very hard to develop these technologies safely when our regulatory environment works at a snail's pace. So this is the real challenge of these, what has in the past, as you say, taken decades to advance the rights of these really important causes. We don't have that time.
Yeah, we're now really at a fork in the road with AI, aren't we? It's the big unknown. On the plus side, AI through Google and keyboard searching, you would hope, would provide people with accurate information. On the other hand, it's basically a harvester of information. So with that will probably be a lot of misinformation and a lot of misleading information. So what do we do, really? I mean, we're up against it.
It's really hard. It's really hard. And, AI is a hard challenge for people to get their heads around because it's so pervasive. It's going to change absolutely everything about our lives as we know it, and it's going to happen really quickly. And so, some of the early impacts are obvious. There's the scale and volume of the amount of manufactured fake content out there is clear for everyone to see. But I think we need to not lose sight of the forest for the trees there. It's not just in the content that AI can create. It's the world that AI creates around us, one where people that are growing up now are not going to accept any information they see. They will be increasingly cut off from real human connection, and the ability of people to manipulate them will increase exponentially. Because manipulation works when you understand someone really well and you know what to say to them and how to say it to them. You can outsource that now. So look, there will be amazing advances in society. There will be enormous benefits to AI, but there may be enormous negative consequences. And unless we are able to regulate it effectively and get ahead of it, then we're going to experience the bad very quickly.
Your book is incredibly insightful. It's very well written. I went from cover to cover with it in a matter of about a week and a half. How long did it take you to write, by the way? Without AI, I might add. You talk about AI in your preface.
I do. I have a preface saying, something I think will be more common, which is a statement saying no AI was used. But I also say I did wonder as I was writing it, will this be the last book ever written by a human? And that's how the world feels around us. It was really hard to write because the landscape changes so quickly. Rage bait became the Oxford Dictionary word of the year as I was, in the process of writing and editing it. Trump would open his mouth and say something outrageous. I was writing a chapter about Charlie Kirk, and then he got assassinated before I could finish it, and I had to rewrite the whole thing. These events happen in real time in our social media feed in front of us, and it was a challenge to keep pace with them. But I felt so deeply that what we lack in society at the moment and what my contribution to it could be is to map the way that this is a scary new power that people have figured out how to game. people have figured out how to manipulate and people have figured out how to monetize. And the more we can educate people about how these systems of outrage work on social media, the better equipped they are to navigate that ecosystem, to recognize it when it's happening and not to fall for it. So that's my goal for the book, is to help spread that.
It's a good book for parents to read, parents of young kids and teenagers in particular who are coming into the teenage years, because forewarned is forearmed, as they say. Ed, it's been a delight talking to you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Greg. And I believe we may be near the 300th episode. I don't know, maybe we're the 299th or 301st or something. So congratulations to you and the team. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
To enjoy more in-depth journalism from the latest edition of Good Weekend, visit us at theage.com.au or smh.com.au. This episode was produced by Conrad Marshall and edited by Tim Mummery, with technical assistance from Josh Towers and Leah Timson. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills. Lisa Muxworthy and Tom McKendrick oversee our podcasts. And Melissa Stevens is the editor of Good Weekend. If you enjoyed this episode, follow our podcast and leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. And thanks for listening.